Some people are entertainers, and some people are great entertainers. Some people are followers, and some people make the path and are pioneers. Jackie, where you are, I'd like to say I love you and thank you so much.
How does a rock star who makes so much money lose it all? If you're too young to remember American Bandstand in its heyday, you may not know Jackie Wilson. He was one of rock and roll's first big names, stars who were the envy of their generation, not only having the time of their lives, but making fortunes along the way. Yet in Jackie Wilson's case, Bob Brown found a different story. If the music of rock and roll helped shatter innocence, the business of rock and roll was not an innocent game.
Come out here on the floor. Let's rock some more.
He had flashy stage presence and a voice with the power of an operatic tenor. Rock and roll star Jackie Wilson, billed as Mr. Excitement, sold millions of records in the 50s and 60s. Lonely Teardrops, To Be Loved, Higher and Higher were some of his hits. And he created a performance style that singers from Elvis Presley to Michael Jackson have imitated.
Jackie was a performer. He had the smile, the flash. That's what was great. He would do this, and the women would say, ah! You know, Jackie! And he'd fall down on his knees, you know. God, that was just great. He was a great performer.
Jackie Wilson on stage, he personified what I considered rock and roll show business to be about.
You might think that an artist of Jackie Wilson's stature and talent, who sold millions of hit records, could have enjoyed the financial independence and security that some other rock stars were able to build. But this is a story of how Jackie Wilson died riddled with debts, without even a headstone for his grave. A man whose money problems had worsened through the years because of the way his managers had shuffled his income and expenses and tax obligations. Academy Award-winning songwriter Al Kasha got his start writing for Wilson.
He didn't know how deep in the hole he was getting further and further in the hole to them, and the books were never honest anyway.
I became very much aware of his plight, you know, as a lot of the other singers had the same situation.
Singer Mary Wilson, formerly one of the Supremes, and Joey D., who sold millions of twist records in the 60s, understand from their own experiences how a star as big as Jackie Wilson might wind up with very little to show for it.
There were lots of double dealing, double contracting, and just sheer ripping off of the act. You must understand, the acts in those days were teenagers going against corporate people.
And as kids, you don't think that it's a cold business. I think you grow up and you find that out.
You look out, rub my back while I'm in pain.
And when you grow up, it's often too late.
Kiss me with your ruby red lips. Thrill me so I turn her back over flip. That is why.
Jackie Wilson's final years were spent on the rock and roll revival circuit. This 1975 performance was filmed by a Boston disc jockey who followed his career. It was Wilson's last complete performance. On September 29, 1975, Jackie Wilson had an apparent heart attack and collapsed on stage at the Latin Casino in Cherry Hill. He was 41 years old, and for the next 8 years until his death, he remained incapacitated, brain damaged, in a New Jersey nursing home. That was when some of the financial realities caught up. Even though he'd been a star for more than 20 years, Jackie Wilson was in debt. He owed an estimated $300,000 in back taxes and well over $100,000 to a company owned by the man he had trusted to keep his financial affairs straight. It was a classic story of how money had melted away from a young performing artist and materialized in other people's hands. And it began back in the 50s. Wilson's manager was a man named Nat Tarnopol, who was also president of Brunswick, the recording company for which Wilson made all of his hits. The debts that Wilson owed to Brunswick were, in fact, among the most common means of exploiting an artist's earnings, advancing him money to live well for the present, and setting up a future in which Jackie Wilson would be constantly on the hook to Brunswick Records and Nat Tarnopol, who exercised control over his income.
Did he know as a performer that he wasn't getting all that he deserved in terms of the monies that were coming back to him?
I don't think he really knew, because he was always going to his managers and publishers for, quotes, advances or something that he would want to buy. But the game that was being played is, okay, Jackie, buy it. And there was no protection of his money. In fact, it was actually stealing of his money. And saying, you now let's look at the books, you took this amount. Jackie was never aware, you know, of how much he took or how much he was spending.
You have to ask those questions because more than likely people won't ask them for you. And in those days, you know, I'm sure Jackie just assumed it was all being taken care of.
Not only was there no investment on behalf of Jackie Wilson's future, and not only was a mountain of debt being run up against his name, shortly before Wilson's collapse in 1975, Nat Tarnopol and other Brunswick record executives were indicted for tax evasion and mail fraud in a bribery and payola scandal. Among other things, it was charged that Brunswick record artists, and Jackie Wilson was far and away the most popular, were defrauded of royalties, the money they were supposed to earn from sales of their records. According to the indictment, Brunswick made hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of record shipments that were never put on the books. So the artists were never paid royalties on them. In essence, it was alleged that the same company that had run up debts in Wilson's name was also cheating him out of the money he could have used to help pay them back.
Nat Tarnopol was convicted in 1976. A federal appeals court overturned the conviction 18 months later, but the judges took pains to add in their opinion that they were satisfied there was evidence from which a jury could find that Brunswick artists had been defrauded.
A jury never had a chance to evaluate that evidence because a second trial never took place. And even if one had, Jackie Wilson would have been incapable of taking action or testifying because he lay in a nursing home, brain damaged from his collapse. In 1987, Nat Tarnopol died of heart failure, and we were led to one last small but telling footnote on his career by Jackie Wilson's friend, Al Kasha, who told us why some songwriters may never get credit on their work.
If you look at the back of the records, you start seeing other names, you know, the names of some of the publishers' names, some of the record producers' names who did write those songs.
We did look, and one of the things we found was that on Jackie Wilson's record of Doggin' Around, the writing credit is listed to a Paul Tarnopol. Paul Tarnopol is Nat Tarnopol's son. He wasn't even born when Doggin' Around was recorded.
Jackie Wilson was born on June 9, 1934 in Detroit, Michigan. As a teenager growing up in Detroit, Jackie won the Golden Gloves at the age of 16. He wanted to become a professional prize fighter, but he was pressured from his mother to get into a more stable career. Jackie turned to singing. In 1953, Jackie Wilson joined a group called the Dominoes, replacing Clyde McPhatter. Clyde McPhatter went on to form a group called the Drifters. Now, in 1957, Jackie left the Dominoes to pursue his own career. Jackie met a man named Nat Tarnopol, who took on the job of managing Jackie, and a few months later he got Jackie an exclusive contract with Brunswick Records, and the rest is history. You're about to hear an interview with Jackie and myself.
Well, actually, I met Nat through the late Al Green, who was the manager of Laverne Baker at the time, and we were all from Detroit. Nat was a young, hot-headed kid that wanted to get ahead, and he was doing all the publishing for Al Green. And, well, at least Al Green took me when I left the Dominoes, and he started to manage me. And he got me a contract through Laverne Baker with Decca, which was for Brunswick. And then, well, God rest his soul, he died. And then Nat decided he was going to try his hand. Although there was several other guys around, Nat just packed up one day and took me by the arm with his raincoat, and never forgetting we ran.
Now, in 1957, this was a big year for you because that first hit record on Brunswick came about, Rick Petit. How did that happen?
That happened through a young man I don't know if you know very well, but he's got a small label. I think it's called Slowtown. No, Motown. His name is Berry Gordy Jr. He was doing the writing for us then.
Berry Gordy followed with another hit record right on the heels. That's Why. How about that one? What can you remember about that song?
I remember that, well, I liked it, but I was very hoarse that day on the studio. I couldn't hardly talk because I had been working so hard, you know, with the other songs and on the road. And so I couldn't hit. as Nat would call it, bird. They used to say, hit the bird, man, hit the bird, which is the high note.
Now you had your first hit record, and Jackie Wilson's all of a sudden became a familiar name with disc jockeys around the country. But I think it was the spring of 1958 when your first gold record came about, which was a ballad called To Be Loved. Was there a special story behind that one?
Well, actually, that was Barry's idea, too, and also his penmanship. He decided I could sing better than I could gimmick. He wanted to prove I could do both.
Well, you had a song that came out around 1967 that, to me, was almost note for note the Jackie Wilson of the 50s. The song was Higher and Higher, and it's one of my all-time favorites, and because of the way it builds and everything else. But that was so close to what you were doing in the 50s. What was the reason that this song came about?
Because they threw it away. They threw it in the garbage can. The song itself, because the guy that brought it in on a tape with a group singing and a little tinky guitar, and no one could hear it but me. I could actually hear the way that, well, I felt it. It was a church-type thing. And they took it and threw it away, and I picked it back up. I told them to try it.
One time in your career, you were a professional or prize fighter. What was the reason that you left the ring to choose to go into a field of singing?
Actually, I didn't want to leave. My mother just grabbed me by the hair one day and told me no more. Well, actually what happened, I had a good record, and I had won Golden Gloves in Michigan with a mustache, and I was only about 16. I was supposed to be 18, the whole bit, and I was just getting real good, and she walked into the arena one night, and I was boxing, and I always looked for a certain seat, and she wasn't there. And all of a sudden she walked in, and my nickname is Sonny. And she hollers out real loud, "Hey, Sonny!" And I turn around and whop, whop, whop. So she finally saw me get beat to bits. So she told me no more.
Is this where you kind of developed that fancy footwork that you do on stage, that spinning around in that style of yours?
Yes,
in the ring?
Is.
I kind of watched you. You were so light on your feet,
yes,
just like you were prancing around in the ring. There's one area in your career, it's been a tragic one, but I'm sure you've probably, something good has come from it. But in 1961, a near-fatal accident happened when one of your frenzied fans approached you with a pistol and you got shot.
I was shot in the stomach. And, well, I still have the bullet. I still carry it. It's in my back, but it's in a safe place. I just can't move it because it hasn't moved. And, well, it's not a nice story, but it's not a bad story. Because actually the young lady, that's why we didn't prosecute her. She wasn't shooting at me. She was going to shoot herself. And when a person's a little off at the time, and they're kind of strong, I grabbed the pistol, but I am the one that got shot.
People have described your singing voice and style almost to be operatic. Did you ever have any formal training in this area?
Well, I can give credit to Mr. Billy Ward for that. He was a vocal coach at Carnegie Hall, and I studied under him for for 2 years straight.
Why was it, or how was it that you never recorded for Berry Gordy on Motown? Was there a reason for that?
Well, I was recording before he got Motown, and I was with Brunswick, and we had no complaints.
What makes Jackie Wilson still go? What makes you want to keep performing the way you do?
Well, actually, Norm, there's somewhere I want to go. I just don't know where. I want to act, but not necessarily. I also want to be a disc jockey secretly. That's true. And
let me ask you this question,
yes,
then. If you were a disc jockey for 1 hour and I put you in a studio to play records, and I said I'd give you a stack of one type of music or one type of performer you could play for an hour, what would that performer, who would you play for 1 solid hour if you were
Elvis Presley.
Elvis Presley?
Yes.
That's interesting. Why would it be Elvis Presley?
Because he's a very good friend of mine. I know a lot about him. I could talk a lot about him. In a very nice way.
Right.
He also did me a great favor once. I was in Hollywood, California, and I was playing a club called The Trip. And we were having a little difficulty getting people to come out, at that particular time. So he came out twice for me. And, well, you couldn't get in. And they said, if Elvis go, then he must be, hey, let us go, man.
When you're not performing, are there any performers or special types of music you enjoy listening to?
Yes. I like all types because actually if I'm available, as you say, if I'm off work and I'm somewhere like Vegas, or I might be in Lake Tahoe, well, I'll go catch just about anybody, but I love Sammy Davis. I just love to watch him. And when Sinatra was around, I'd always get me a front row seat. I don't care where I was. If I was working, I'd have one night off, I'd go, there. In fact, he done me a great favor once. I was playing Las Vegas, and I was at the Riviera in the lounge, and he was at the Sands. And we went down to see him one night on off night. And after he finished the show, I'll never forget, he had two big bands. I can't remember. He had Count Basie on one side of the stage, and he had, what's his other recording band that he did?
Well, he's had Nelson Riddle.
Nelson Riddle on one side and Count Basie on the other. And there he was in the middle. And he'd do a number with Count, and he'd go over and do a number with Nelson. And after the show was over, he walked off, and we get applause, and he came back out, and he said, wait a minute, sit down. He said, what's the matter? I said, what's wrong with you? So I guess I'm going to tell you. It's a young man sitting in the front. His name is Jackie Wilson. You go see him. I'm coming down. You'll dig him. And it was just great. Just like that, no more said, no more done, and walked off. And, well, you couldn't get in the place. They actually came down, everybody.
In your career, you were singing rock and roll songs, and you were traveling around the country on a lot of these tours and shows. But then in the 60s, you decided to make somewhat of a break and start appearing in major nightclubs like in New York, Las Vegas, Miami Beach.
Right.
Was this transition from rock and roll package shows to nightclubs very difficult?
No, because I did the same act. I never changed. The only difference, I'd wear the tuxedos in the major clubs, and on the rock and roll shows, I just wear the regular suits.
How was it appearing at the Copa for the very first time, having a chance to go out on that floor where all the big stars were?
I thought I was Sinatra Jr. No, I felt great, honestly.
How did you ever get the name or the title that's been attached to you, Mr. Excitement?
Probably because I do perspire an awful lot. And I start the show the way most people finish, they tell me.
One of the biggest songs, if not the biggest song, and the one that most people associate with Jackie Wilson, was recorded in 1958 and wound up as being your biggest hit. I heard a story about the song, about the tempo which it was originally supposed to be recorded about. I'm speaking of the song Lonely Teardrops. You want to give us the story behind that one?
Right. Well, it's an old story, but it's a good one. The truth of the matter, it was supposed to have been a ballad, a blues ballad. And it was written also by Berry Gordy, Jr. And Nat and I flew in from New York. We heard the song, we liked it, and we took it back. And then we did record it as a blues ballad, but we didn't like it. So then we decided to play with the guitar a little bit, and we had a great arranger at the time, Dick Jacobs. And we had him finagle with it a little bit, and we played, and we got a good tempo going, and it was like a calypso at the time, which was very popular. And we took it, and we liked it, and we brought it back, and we gave it to the disc jockey. We ran, and it was hot off the press. Told him to play it. So they put the record on, and Barry was there, he was waiting patiently, and everybody was just waiting, and they put it on. And Barry said, "Oh, my God, you ruined my record, my song. What have you done?" Tears came out his eyes.
One person, when every time I listen to a song like Lonely Teardrops, I think of a singing style, and this is why I want to get your opinion about this person, Sam Cooke.
Oh, now you're talking about a man. That's a real stylist. Sam, to me, well, actually, it's very well known that we were the best of friends. And in fact, we're the only two at the time that would go out on tour together. And we never worried about top billing. We would just have me here one day and his name here the next day, and this type thing. But as far as singing and his style, I just don't think it'll ever be equal.
Was there something special that Sam Cooke had that set him apart from other ordinary singers?
Yes. I just personally think it was God. I think it's soul, as they put it, but to me it was God. He had just a certain sound.
How do you describe what's happening in music today? Is there any special way you can describe it?
Well, yes. There's an intermingle of feelings between different type people. You take your folk music. It's so groovy, and it's actually different. And you take the Beatles, when they came over with their sound. and you just take it and you mix it all up, and you get one big collaboration of beautiful things, and they do come out different, very differently than well, the 50s we had one main thing going. We had a lot of knockdown, drag out, and then we had a little pretty music in between too, but not just with the plain guitar and not with the makeup lyrics, and in the makeup studio, no more lead sheets. Who needs them? We go in, you know, and you just cut, and it's just, well, I dig it, you know.
Jackie, isn't it another thing, being a performer and having a chance, you feel that one great thing I've always felt about music is it can communicate to all kinds of people. It has no color line. It is so great that music sometimes can reach people more so than all the talking, all the politicians, or anything else. You can reach people, I mean, all kinds of people.
Well, that's true, because of that I have noticed in my working that I find certain people, they won't clap for certain songs, but they will clap for what they came to hear. And that's a variety of things. Some people want to cry, some come to laugh, some come to knock down, drag out, some come to just plain listen, study, and then there's some that just come because they really enjoy watching their favorite performer. And it's a beautiful feeling and a beautiful sight to see.
You know, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be back, like I said. And God knows I hope to be back in the near future very soon. Thank you very much. In the meanwhile, may I say, whatever goes up has a tendency most time to come down. Now, we all know that. We also know that what goes around eventually comes around. But I'd like to say that nobody does anything wrong unless they want to do it. By the same token, no one does anything right unless they want to do it. Think about me, and I'll be damned if I won't think about you.